There's a particular kind of grief that doesn't announce itself at the door. It slips in quietly, years after the fact, dressed up as a regular Tuesday afternoon. You're scrolling your phone, maybe half distracted, maybe not, and then a name appears that you haven't let yourself think about in a decade, and suddenly every wall you built around that chapter of your life just collapses at once. Here's the thing about childhood friendships. They're not just relationships. They're the original operating system you ran on before the world got complicated. And somewhere between growing up, moving away, and becoming whoever adulthood told you to be, you let that connection quietly drop off the network without ever hitting the disconnect button yourself. We tell ourselves a story that people drift apart naturally, like it's a tide nobody controls, like distance is just geography and not a series of small choices. But if we're being honest, most of us chose busyness, chose comfort, chose the path of least emotional resistance, and called it life. For me, it was Marcus. We had been inseparable from ages 7 through 15, the kind of friends who had a whole shared language of inside jokes that would have meant nothing to anyone else on the planet. Then high school reshuffled the deck. I got absorbed into a different crowd. He moved 2 towns over when his parents split. And we both did that thing where you mean to call and never do, where we should catch up becomes a phrase you say with no intention of following through. Years passed the way they tend to fast, and unremarkable on the surface, but quietly seismic underneath. By the time I was in my early 30s, Marcus existed mostly as a nostalgic blur, a name I'd mention at the bottom of a third beer when someone asked about old friends. Then a mutual friend texted me that Marcus was sick, and not the manageable kind of sick. He had been diagnosed over a year prior and hadn't told many people, which, if you knew Marcus, was exactly the kind of stoic, don't make a fuss move he would pull. I sent him a message that took me 4 drafts and 2 deleted attempts to write. I kept overcorrecting between sounding too casual, like no time had passed, and too heavy, like I was already eulogizing him. What I finally sent was simple. Something like, I heard, and I don't have the right words, but I miss you, and I'm sorry I disappeared. He responded within an hour with a voice memo, which caught me completely off guard, and his voice was the same, warmer than I deserved after that many years of silence. We video called the following weekend, and then the weekend after that. We talked about everything, the petty grudges we'd held as kids that seemed absurd now, the versions of ourselves we'd each grown into, the paths we almost took, and the ones we wished we'd taken together. He told me he wasn't bitter about the years we lost, and I didn't know whether to feel relieved or more devastated by that. He said something I've turned over in my head almost every day since that closure isn't something you get from the other person. It's something you negotiate with yourself, and reconnecting just gives you better information to work with. The last time we talked, he was tired but sharp, and we laughed more than I expected. I don't think either of us said goodbye in any formal way, because it felt unnecessary. Like the conversation was complete on its own terms without needing a ribbon tied around it. He passed about 6 weeks later. I did not cry immediately, which confused me at the time. And then I cried at completely random moments for the following 3 months in grocery stores, during meetings, while watching completely unrelated television. What I carried out of that experience wasn't just grief. It was a kind of reckoning with how casually I treat the people who actually matter. The lesson wasn't dramatic or complicated, it was just, don't wait. Reach out, say the thing, because the version of you that keeps meaning to do it is running on borrowed time that belongs to someone else. I think about Marcus now whenever I catch myself putting off a message to someone I care about, using busyness as a reason instead of calling it what it actually is, which is fear. Reconnecting with him didn't erase the distance, but it converted those lost years from a wound into something I could finally carry without it cutting me every time I moved. If you have a Marcus in your life, someone you've been meaning to reach out to, stop negotiating the perfect moment and just send the imperfect message. The gap between you is probably much smaller than the story you've been telling yourself about why it exists. If this resonated with you, subscribe and go check out everything else we've made. You won't regret the rabbit hole.